If you want to be more effective in your work and in your life, and you'd like to have more confidence that you're meeting your intentions, this is where it begins. Welcome to Do Busy Right, helping you organize your information and manage your attention so that they work for you, not against you. We educate you and encourage you by discussing ways to be more effective, not more exhausted. Let's do busy right. Hi there. I've been wanting to talk with you for a while about what I've tried to do with attention compass and how it's different from other approaches that you may be aware of and other practices that you've tried. And it really boils down to my critique of current productivity help coaching. You see, I developed the attention compass. I didn't discover it. I didn't invent a tool. It's based on my understanding of principles and the principles of information management, the principles of attention management, and the principles of work. If we take these principles and we incorporate them into our workflows, then they're going to produce specific results in our lives. I developed the attention compass, and I make no bones about the fact that a lot of people went before me and did a lot of really good thinking about productivity. And attention compass is derived from Stephen Covey, from David Allen, and from a lot of different folks who have written blogs and books. They thought about this, and their thinking was pretty well regarded by the community, so I adopted their instruction. Attention compass is not magic. I'm not some genius, brilliant dude. I was just trying to get better at my career, more productive. And I got tired of being told mindset things. I got tired of being told, hey, Larry, you're just thinking about it the wrong way. And if you change the way you think about it, then all of a sudden your life will get better. Well, I've come to find out that knowledge simply doesn't work that way. I love Stephen Covey. I love the 7 Habits. I even have an autographed copy on my bookshelf. The problem with the 7 Habits is you've got to take what Covey says and then you've got to figure out how to implement against that. Reading the book is not magic. The information contained in the pages is not a secret sauce. I refer to David Allen. And that's one of the great things he did is he's not playing around with any theoretical stuff. He says, look, you got a piece of paper in your hand. Do this with it. I love that practicality because then that's something that we can do as we try to get better at our bigger picture. The principles are important. And as an academic and a scientist, I want the theories to be true and accurate. But at the same time, in order to be effective, it's got to be actual practical advice. So my headline here is stop wasting time and causing yourself a whole bunch of anxiety by listening to people who are giving you less than helpful input. If you want different results in your life, then you have to do differently. You have to behave differently. And that has surprisingly little to do with how you think. It may be disappointingly little. I'll go back and reiterate some development history on attention compass so you'll see what I mean. I tried a lot of things that didn't work, and I'll say they were poor tools. I'm not saying that they, quote, didn't work for me, unquote. A lot of people say that, and I'll talk about that in a minute. It's that in studying these systems after the fact, I now understand what principles they didn't incorporate and why they didn't work. And I would suggest that they never worked great for anybody. Were they something of an improvement? Yes, they were. Did they make us feel a little bit better? Yes, they did. Did they really solve the problem? Not terribly effectively, and most of them have now gone away. I tried Daytimer. I tried the paper version of getting things done. I read multiple books with tips and ideas and thought processes, but very few with the actual practical workflow steps. And again, that's what I loved about GTD. All I knew was that I had a problem. And when I was trying to do my work, my attention was not where it needed to be. My information was not where it needed to be. And because of that, I scrounged around and started trying to engineer a solution. I'm a tinkering engineering kind of guy. I'm not somebody that puts up with problems in the world very contentedly. I'd rather put some duct tape and a coat hanger on some things and see if we can't make them a little bit better. And that's what I did for really 15, 17, 18 years. As I understood these principles, I tried to do incremental improvements on my own system, my own practices. Finally, it coalesced into something that's measurably better than what came before. And at that point, I began to get the practices organized so that I could describe them to other people. And I would say that the field has not changed much in the 12 years since that happened. I still try to keep up. I'm very intrigued by this stuff. And I look forward to a time when somebody comes up with the silver bullet here, a new way to approach this. If that happens, I'll try and help you evaluate it. And if it's better, then I'll say it's better and I'll point you in that direction. I continue to look at productivity advice and check into the blogs and the books. I go on LinkedIn and search hashtag productivity. In fact, I did that not too long ago just to see what the state of the field is there. And I'll walk you through what I found. You might guess that I'm going to be disappointed. But I think that'll illustrate where the problems are with what people in my field are doing. And that will really highlight the difference with attention compass. And that's why I think it's the solution that you need, assuming that you have the problem that attention compass solves, which the odds are in my favor. So I found the top 10 productivity tips. Now, just for context, this is an hour-long talk from a reputable site that aggregates different talks, has guest speakers on and things. So they invited this person in to give this talk on the top 10 ways to be more productive. Now, in my recounting of the story, I'm going to be pretty generic just because I don't see any reason to bash anybody particularly. People are trying to help. They know what they know. But I will say they apparently haven't studied it because they just get in the echo chamber and they say the same things that everybody else is saying. They might spin the words a little bit different. Again, this was supposed to be an expert guest saying these things. So I'll just read through his top 10. Work from rest, not for rest. Take regular breaks daily. Tackle the biggest tasks first. Designate time daily for emails. Keep the main thing the main thing. Keep your energy level high. Prepare the night before. Win the first hour, win the day. Protect your margins. Engage in activity stacking. That's the list. That's the top 10 productivity practices. Now, there are three really interesting parts to that list for me. One is that a lot of these things are mindset things. And we talked about mindset things. I don't need to change my mindset. I want to be more productive. I need to know how. So I don't need mindset, I need practice. Two is there are practical pieces of advice, but we're not told how to implement them. So they're not processes, they're more like results. For example, take regular breaks daily. Okay, I'm happy to do that. How do we implement that in our current reality? In our current reality that we're overstressed and we're dog paddling to try to keep our nose out of the water. How are we supposed to build in break time? And then the third thing is a lot of this is simply regurgitated from other sources. So we're saying the same things over and over again. And certainly in my mind, everybody that cares has already heard this stuff and presumably has implemented it and is getting the same kinds of results that I expect. I'll get to it later, but the people that I've coached who've been successful with Attention Compass are people that will tell you they spent a lot of time trying to do these things. And then they discovered Attention Compass, and then they actually began to get the results that they're looking for. And that's my worry with the kind of typical productivity thinking and advice that we were talking about a second ago. And I think you'll agree that it is, in fact, typical. So if this episode of this podcast is the first time you've ever heard, keep the main thing, then please write me an email and tell me that. That's information that goes all the way back to Covey from 40 years ago. So that's the challenge of my industry. And the reason that I want you to understand that challenge is so that you understand what I'm doing is very different. If you've listened to much of the podcast here, you probably understand that already. So this is encouragement to understand what Attention Compass is and how to engage with it, and some motivation to do so. I really want to help you solve this problem that we all share. So here you say, Larry, you say Attention Compass is fundamentally different. Well, talk to me about that. I'd say one of the primary features of Attention Compass is it's based on principles. When we talk about Attention Compass, I'm going to try to educate you on these principles. I try to do that in the podcast as well. These are principles around how your brain works with information. Principles around how your brain works with tasks. I've studied this, and I want to help you understand how the tools that you have actually work and what they're good at. And that's true both with the tools God gave you and the tools that you can get on your computer, your brain and your tools. So I've studied that stuff, and I'm trying to bring it to you, packaged in actionable steps. I have an extensive background in information systems, which means that I've studied and worked to understand what information is and how it works. I want to bring you an understanding of information storage, information use, and the value of information in your work and in your life. And from that information systems academic level, we have principles around what we do about and with information in our world. One point in my career, I was a software developer and an architect of software systems, and I managed software development teams. So I'm going to bring you a perspective on the tools that are available to us from that software developer's perspective. And that perspective tells me that the current tools we're using are almost definitely not good tools for the task that we're trying to get them to do. I say almost definitely, meaning if you're using the standard tools don't do what we want them to do. Some of the tools are information storage systems. Now, here's the principle about information storage. There are really just a handful of different kinds of information storage systems. There's not hundreds of wildly different ways to solve this problem. There are hundreds of different apps, but there's really just a handful of ways to solve the information storage problem. Each one of those ways was developed with certain goals and targets in mind, and each one has pros and cons. And most of the ones that are easily accessible to people that come out of the box are not very useful for the task they're intended to solve. Now, why that is philosophically and practically is not the point of the podcast. It's simply true that the software, the computer tool industry is developing things the way they develop them. And just like any other product, it's not always with the user's best interest in mind. But the point for our purposes here today is that I've studied this and I understand it, and I'm bringing this information to you. And that information is that you need a different tool. Unfortunately, there's another problem with tools, and that's the intent of the tool. In the current software world, we've moved to an era where most people in the software development industry are trying to figure out a way to deliver more information to you. They're not trying to figure out ways to help you deal with the information you've already got. I've talked about this in other podcasts. There's been no major innovation in email in 15 to 18 years. And that's one of the pinnacles of our current communication. Now, there's lots of nuance to this, but I'm trying to help you understand that A, the tools that we have are not designed for the purposes we put them to. And B, the intent of the tools we have is not always to help you deal with information. Instead, they're to present information to you so that your attention is where the tool developers want it to be. Now, if you don't buy what I'm saying right now about information storage tools, I get it. Here's what I want you to do. Conduct an experiment. I want you to take a week and notice how much time you spend looking for information that you already possess. How much time is it costing you to have to go and dig for that information to not have it at the right time? How much does that interfere with whatever it is you're trying to get done? So spend some time thinking about that and document that for yourself. Scribble it down. And this is part of the thrashing that I talk about. And I think you'll understand it when you measure it. The tools at our disposal are simply not built and not intended to help you deal with the kind of information we all need to deal with. Now, the principles that I refer to, the rules of productivity, are actually pretty simple. The principles of information systems are not very simple. The principles of software development are not very simple. And the principles of how your brain works are not terribly simple. But the rules of productivity, pretty simple. And we've known them for a long time. And the world has not changed in kind, it's just changed in quantity. So the rules still apply. The rules of productivity. Rule number one, reuse everything you can. Don't reinvent the wheel. If you can avoid it, don't resolve problems that are already solved. Just reuse the existing solutions. Rule number two, focus. Don't thrash. Don't try and do multiple things at the same time. Do what you need to be doing, focus on that, get it done, and then move on to the next thing. This is pretty simple stuff. It's not rocket science, and it doesn't need 10 tips. What it needs is a fundamentally different approach. One of the problems that we face is that we get interference from our cultural view of dealing with information and communications and from the existing tools. This is the only place where mindset really comes in, is this cultural view. In order to make progress here, we're going to have to stop thinking that the tools we have available and the ways that everybody else is doing things are right or the best way to do things. I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's like Dave Ramsey says, if you handle your money like everybody else around you handles their money, you'll be as broke as they are. Same thing is true. If you do the same things you see other people doing, your productivity will be as poor as theirs is. Now, there's two sides to this poor productivity. One is we know it's poor and that causes us stress. We see undone things piling up. So that's one side. That's the negative side. It causes us stress. It causes us to work too much, which causes us other kinds of stress. We ignore relationships, all these different things. Side two is a sin of omission. And that is, until you get your productivity straight, you'll not get a lot better at what you do, whatever it is. After all, that's what productivity means. It's producing more results. So we look at it and we say, okay, what do we do? Well, the attention compass perspective is we're going to start building habits. We're going to start having workflows that are in line with the principles that we understand of how your brain works, how information works, and how software tools work. Now, building habits, as we all know, is not straightforward, and that's why it takes 8 weeks to implement attention compass. I could sit you down and tell you everything you need to know about attention compass in about 2 hours. I could give you all the information you need. And if that would work, I'd do it because it would save me time. But it doesn't work. And it doesn't work because we don't need more knowledge. We don't need more information. We don't need more stuff to think about or with. We need more workflows, more habits. We need more systems. So I teach these systems. And together we work to build these habits of managing the issues in our lives well and with the appropriate tools. I keep trying to define what that means and what it looks like for people. And it turns out that your attention is the key. And I think that's true culturally, for example, because it's your attention that's scarce. It's your attention that is needed to do what you need to do. And it's your attention that's under attack in the cultural time we're in. And so that's the focus. That's this focus ability that we talked about, rule 2 of productivity. And that's why we call it attention compass. Put your attention where it needs to be. Now, if you want to think about practical examples of this attention thing that we need to do, then I fall back to athleticism as a metaphor for attention. So let's say you play tennis and you're a great hitter of tennis balls, and standing still, you can make the ball go exactly where you want it to. You hit it hard, you don't make mistakes. That can make you a really good tennis player. The problem is you've got to get to where the ball is in order to employ your skills at hitting the ball. If you're a great hitter of tennis balls, but you can't get to where the ball is, your skill at hitting it is useless. Just think about it. A tennis player who has shackles on their ankles, doesn't matter how great a hitter of the tennis ball they are, they're going to lose because they can't get to the ball in order to employ their skill. The same thing is true with our attention. And we really don't understand this because we still have the cultural image of physical work. All physical work requires is your body to be where it needs to be. Well, on second thought, maybe that's another good metaphor. If you've got a job in the factory, here's the truth. If you can't get to the factory, you can't do your job. Well, the same thing's true with our attention. If you can't put your attention on the task you need to do, then that task is not going to get done. It doesn't matter how skilled you are. So let's try another metaphor. Think about a doctor that's this great diagnoser, this great diagnostician. I think is the actual correct word. This doctor can look at you and ask you 3 questions and then immediately go, oh, you've got X, here's the pill you need to take, go home and you'll be fine in 2 days. And that's a great skill to have. But if that physician can't get in front of patients, then the skill is useless. If you put that physician in jail, then there's no way to utilize that skill. And that's the same thing that we face when we're dealing with information tasks. So we went from tennis, which is this physical task, to doctoring, which is a knowledge task. And now let's look at an information kind of task. Let's say you're some great wizard with Excel spreadsheets. You know how to make those puppies dance and sing. That's great. But if you can't find the input data that your customer wanted you to use in producing this spreadsheet, then all the great spreadsheet technology in the world is not going to help you. So you've got to be able to get information and attention together in the same place at the same time. Questions. How do we get our information when we need it? And how do we bring our attention when we need it? Both of these ideas are practices, but they're not common in human behavior. And they're governed by these principles that I've referred to. And that's why I listed out some of my credentials, because these principles are from different fields. So I understand information systems and the uses and the availability of information and how to get at it best. And when I say it's not where it needs to be, what I mean is, you know, it's on your computer and you're sitting at your computer. But your computer's a big place. And it could be anywhere. And that's why understanding the computer tools is important. For most of us, that's where our information is, on the computer. And that's what we rely on to store our information. So we have expertise there. So all of these metaphors, the purpose of them, of the metaphors, is that's what attention compass does with your attention and information. It puts you in a position where you can bring your attention to the task, and your information is there associated with the task. So you can easily employ your great Excel spreadsheet skills or your great diagnostic skill, if you're in the doctor metaphor, or you put together this great tennis swing that produces the results that you want because you're there in the right place at the right time with the right stuff. That's what attention compass does. It minimizes or even eliminates the thrashing that's typical for people. Thrashing around, daydreaming about something that's not what you're supposed to be thinking about. Distraction. If you've got to do a task for client A, then any worrying or thoughts about client B is a waste. So we've got to be able to bring our attention and have some control and command. And there are principles for how this works. Now, once we get this sorted out, once we get our attention where it needs to be, and we get our information where it needs to be, once we're not wasting time, once we're not wasting attention, then we can get these other good habits going that flow out of that ability. Think about the notion of taking regular breaks during your workday. It's a good idea. All this good advice. Get up, move around. Don't sit there in one spot all day long. Get some exercise. Change your scenery. It'll help your brain. Go take a nap for 10 minutes. It'll refresh you. All those different ideas, that's great. But until you're able to get your attention and information under control, you can't do much about it. These tips are just information, and you can't do information. It's hard to do anything with it. You know, the tennis player that we talked about a minute ago? Well, he's saying, this calls for topspin or that calls for backspin. Well, you can know that, but if you can't get to where the ball is, it doesn't matter. So these other good habits that you hear about flow out of your ability to command your attention and your information. On the other hand, if you can't put your attention where it needs to be, then you constantly feel like you're drowning and you're behind. And if you're drowning, the one thing you can't do is take a break. A lot of people out there are saying, take power naps, breaks during the day. In some ways, this is the equivalent of people that are looking at a guy that's drowning and going, hey, you know, you're going to cramp up if you keep thrashing like that. You need to take some breaks and rest your muscles. Well, can't take a break because I'll go down. And many of us are in that position. We need to get in control and in mastery of our current state of attention and information. And then we can bring in all these other good ideas. Now, I've got a few people in my life who are very honest with me. And I talk to them about fixing what most people refer to as a time management problem. I talk to them about fixing that. And they say, hey, Larry, I don't have time to fix my time management problem. Okay, if that's true, then it's absolutely right. If it's true, it's correct. And I understand that. And if that's where you are, then God bless you, because you are in fact stumped. It's not going to happen magically. You can read all the tips you want, but there's no incantation you can utter. It's workflows, developing workflows, and changing habits. Now, in truth, most people actually could do a couple of things to free up enough time to get this flywheel started. And that's one of the things that I work with people on. If you're willing, we can find the time. Because 8 weeks sounds like a lot of time, but it's 8 one-hour meetings spread over 8 weeks. 1 hour a week with maybe 20 minutes a week of homework. And so there's 168 hours in a week. And if you can't free up 1.5 of them, then yes, maybe you're an air traffic controller, in which case, God bless you. Thank you for persevering and being stubborn in what you're doing. We appreciate it. Listen, I'm not mad at the tips. The tips are great, and they're more or less accurate. They're just not what most of us need right now because we don't have the athleticism to address or implement them. The notion of keep the main thing is absolutely correct. But if you don't know what the main thing is and you can't do the keeping, then advice is useless. What it really means when you boil it down, keep the main thing, it really means to focus. And focus is exactly what most people struggle to do because of all these other things, all this thrashing. But when we think about this athleticism metaphor, that's what it allows us to do. It allows us to know what the main thing is. It allows us to have the strengths to stay there with that main thing when there's other things that are possible for us to do. When we get back to thinking about what the productivity advice is, I think a lot of people like giving tips because it's pretty easy. You restate a lot of things that other people have said, you change the phrasing around a little bit. I'm not going to say it has no value, but it does have limited value. I think a lot of people that have tried to work on their productivity are just worn out by it. If you go to my website, there's a quote there from a client named Kelly Clark. And what she says is, hey, I read all the books, but it wasn't until I got Larry involved that I was able to get on top of this stuff. Corey Stewart is on there saying the same thing. I read all the books. I tried all the things. Tried the bullet journal, tried the Pomodoro timers, all of it, but couldn't get around it because the principles weren't aligned. People try some things and they go, well, it didn't work for me. Well, that means one of two things. Either I'm so broken that I can't be fixed, or there's some idiosyncratic thing that's going on and I'm different. And that's this notion that a productivity system is like a pair of shoes. You got to find the right size or else it's going to hurt you more than it helps. Well, I think both the I'm so broken I can't be fixed and the idiosyncratic positions are way overstated. You're not more broken than your neighbors because I've helped some folks who thought they were pretty broken on this front. You're not more broken than your neighbors, nor do I think it's a terribly idiosyncratic process. I don't think it's fitting you with a pair of shoes. I think there are principles that apply. If you're a human being, and if we can focus on those principles, then we'll see change and improvement. Losing weight, for example, is not an idiosyncratic process. The phrase, it doesn't work for me, must be some sort of a defensive mechanism. Losing weight is not idiosyncratic. You consume fewer calories than you burn, your weight will go down. If you're a human being, this is the way this works. And that's why I said productivity rules are pretty simple. At the end of the day, productivity boils down to this. I got to get my brain where it needs to be, and I got to get my information there at the same time. Then productivity happens. You're able to apply the skills that you learned, but if you can't get there, you can't apply those skills. People get confused because this is in mind space, this is in information space. It's not in physical space in the world. I say, hey, you need to practice getting to where you need to be. And people go, well, I'm sitting in front of the computer. What do you mean? Well, you can sit in front of your computer all day long and not be thinking about what you need to think about. In fact, sitting in front of the computer may be one of your big problems. It may be a source of distraction for you. There are principles and good reasons for this, and we can talk about them at great length. That's what I mean by the work being in information space, in brain space, in attention space. So I think we should focus more on understanding these things and beginning to take practical action to build workflows and habits to resolve these issues. If that's a true thought, then the tips are just a distraction. So here's what happens. Oh, I don't feel like I'm being very productive today. Well, I guess I didn't keep the main thing the main thing. Well, let me sleep on it and I'll try harder tomorrow. And it's not going to solve the problem tomorrow, just like it didn't solve the problem today. It's not a mindset problem. It's not a thinking problem. It's a practice problem. It's a what are the workflows and habits kind of problem. As a teacher, I will tell you that more information does not produce different action. What produces different action is workflows, systems, habits, and those are developed in particular ways. And the tips that we see and get all the time are simply more information. And, we spend some time getting some tips and it makes us feel good in the moment. Oh, my productivity is not where it needs to be. I've got too much stress. Let me go and read a few tips about it. Okay, I tried to do something. I feel better about it. But it's not even a good placebo. It has the opposite effect. It masks the actual problems. So we took some action and now we know something different. Well, the problem is that doesn't produce any behavior change. Information in and of itself almost never does. What produces action is pain. And that's why I want you to take a look at some of the things in your life. Is your stress level too high? Are you struggling to find the things you need to find? Are you struggling to get your attention where it needs to be? Check in on that pain. Don't just ignore it. Check in on it and see if it makes you want to act. So, to back up and summarize, this has been a fairly philosophical kind of conversation about the basis for the attention compass. By the way, I'm going to follow this up. The next podcast I'll do is what is the attention compass? Actually, what is it? And I think that'll go very well with this one because here I'm talking about workflows and things. And so that'll be the next podcast. So tune in for that. What are we currently doing in our search for productivity? Well, I think we're wasting a whole bunch of time and a whole bunch of attention pulling down productivity tips. I don't think many commenters have actionable behavioral guidance in this space. At least I haven't seen it. And that's what attention compass is and does, and that's what it's intended to be. I developed it out of practicing it. I didn't develop it by sitting back and going, okay, well, theoretically, what should happen here? And what that means is that it's a practice. It's practical. We do it. We learn it, learn to do it as compared to the way we typically learn information in school. Our current situation is a problem based in the way we behave, not in the way we think. So as we take on the challenge of getting different results, we need to behave in different ways. And here in our talk, we've laid out what that is. Again, I don't think the problem is lack of information. I have a lot of information here, and I've developed that into these principles and in understanding what a tool needs to look like, what a workflow needs to look like. And so I can bring that to you with the attention compass practice. And the bottom line is, if you've got some pain around this, the cure is not as difficult as you might think. The fact that you look around and other people don't appear to need this, I'm not sure I'd take that on as evidence for or against. Some things for you to think about as you consider your productivity. I promise you that I'm not going to do the 10 tips. I hope that the title of this episode startled you a little bit. But maybe you've just grown used to it and it didn't occur to you that that'd be a weird thing for me to do. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Listen to the next episode. We'll talk a little bit more about what an attention compass is and help you understand that a little bit better. If you'd like to reach out, you can find me on LinkedIn and at larry@dobusywright.com. I'd love to have a conversation about what's going on in your world and whether attention compass is something that would be useful to you. So I hope this has been valuable. I hope it's encouraged you to think about behaviors and workflows and habits as compared to just consuming more information, more tips. If so, do me a favor and take an action here. I'll leave it there for now. This is Larry Tribble, Ph.D. Thanks for taking some time to improve your task and information management on the Do Busy Right podcast. The show is dedicated to helping you think about how to get better at working. And we do this by improving your attention and your focus. I believe that your work is not just about your job, but about all the tasks that you do to turn yourself, your environment, and your relationships into what you want them to be. What we're really talking about here is the underpinnings of becoming who you want to be. The primary way I help people is through coaching the Attention Compass process. Attention Compass is 4 workflows and a tool set that support our information, task, and attention management. I help people with big goals to build habits that put them in a position to achieve. We do this by eliminating wasted time and wasted attention. If you'd like to know more, you can find me on LinkedIn or go to dobusyright.com for more information. Have a good week, more effective and less exhausted. Do busy right.